So, hi, Gennady.
Hey, Jocelyn, how are you?
Good. It's been a while since we got together to record a Behind the Headlines episode, but here we are on Zoom.
Yeah, it's been too long. Good to be
It
back.
has been. It's been a COVID couple of years. So you just finished a long investigation into the tragic death of the city of Palo Alto Utilities lineman, and that was in 2019. It's worthy of a discussion because there's so many complexities about how you went about investigating this. So could you just tell us what the genesis of your project was?
Yeah, well, as we know, as we reported previously, this was a tragic accident that happened in November 16, 2019, when electric lineman Donatos Ohomina died in the line of duty while upgrading transformers on East Meadow Drive. And so, I mean, that was obviously the first genesis. Employee fatalities are extremely tragic and traumatic, but thankfully very rare. When something this rare happens, it's newsworthy, and it brings up a lot of questions. And primary question for me was, how did it happen? What caused the accident? And if there's any underlying issues that the city is exploring to prevent these kinds of things from happening again. So that's kind of the question we've been wrestling with since that incident, and it's kind of kept me engaged in the story since then.
Mm-hmm. So you were able to piece together what exactly happened on that morning when Ohomina went out with his four other people in his crew. Tell us that timeline.
Well, he was a brand new worker, and he was just hired like 5 days prior and just came off this work orientation. And this was third or second assignments with the city. I know he had at least one before this. But they were on their way like early in the morning to replace transformers in front of the Covenant Presbyterian Church. And basically the task was split into two phases. First, they were going to unbolt all the old equipment and then they were going to hook up the new one to the power lines. And Mr. Homina was in one of the two elevated buckets coming off the utility truck. He had a co-worker who was in another bucket below him.
So they were right there. They were on the transformers.
They were near the pole, yeah, by the transformers. And it seemed like the whole crew was kind of preparing. We're in the first task, the unbolting, which did not require any kind of insulation or anything of that sort. But it seems like from the documents we reviewed that things kind of got out of sequence, and Mr. Ohomina kind of went up and got in the area of the power lines. And unfortunately, he got electrocuted in the process. And so, and after that, the city quickly reacted to try to revive him. His crewmates like lowered the bucket and got him out of there. There was the battalion chief from the fire station next door ran out and tried to resuscitate him, and he was quickly taken to Stanford Hospital. But unfortunately, at the hospital, he succumbed to his injuries and he was pronounced dead.
So. Yeah, very tragic accident.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were approaching this project after his death, there are just so many complicating factors here, confidentiality and legal. It's not the kind of situation where you go to the city and say, hey, I'd like all the documents that you have, please, your emails, and they hand it right over to you, and they give you an interview. So what exactly did you have to go to?
Well, I actually did go to the city and ask for that, but yeah.
Well, you asked for that. They couldn't just hand it over to you.
It took a while. I mean, there's obviously a lot of like confidentiality issues, both because it's a sensitive topic in the sense that it's an employee's death, and there's also, if there's any kind of discipline involved for anybody who committed any kind of violations, this would also be kind of kept under wraps because it would be like a human resources issue. So yeah, there's nothing really transparent about the process of reporting this in normal course of action. The city put out like a release about the worker's death the day it happened, and then they later identified him. It was pretty brief, it was kind of just acknowledging the tragedy of what happened, gave a few slight details, but nothing related to like what caused it. So it was really kind of hard to piece that together. So we did, to answer your question, we did a few Public Records Act requests, both with the city and with Cal OSHA, the agency that investigates workplace violations. And the biggest thing we got that helped us piece this story together was the case file from the OSHA investigation, which included, among other things, notes with the crewmates, and most importantly, the worksheets from the inspector and the citations, which OSHA subsequently issued, basically detailing some of the violations it believes the city had committed.
And as I understand it, the inspector went immediately to interview the crew on that day, and then spent the next from November through May, I believe it was, in developing the citations, the 8 citations that it alleged against the city.
Yeah, it took a lot of correspondence between the inspector and the city. There were site visits. There was a lot of kind of follow up for more information, various checklists relating to protective equipment, to the condition of the truck that was used, all sorts of things. And I think around April, the OSHA informed the city that it has an intent to issue various serious violations. And then in May is when they were actually issued formally, totaling like $108,000 in fines. So yeah, it took a little while, but I think that's not usual for these kinds of investigations.
And this is where we really get into the contentions. The Cal OSHA alleged there were violations on the city's part. City is pushing back. What were some of the key violations that OSHA said occurred that led to the death of Ohamana?
Yeah, well, OSHA alleges, and I should point out the city disputes this strongly in its appeals. But some of the violations have to do with, was the employee qualified to be up in that bucket? Did the city ensure that this was a qualified worker, as is required by state law, kind of going near the high voltage lines, and referring to Mr. Hamana? And in addition to that, OSHA cited the city for not having an observer kind of monitoring the work and making sure the operation goes safely. The city was also called out by OSHA with citations for not making sure that the employee getting near the high voltage lines is wearing personal protective equipment, like rubber gloves, most notably, and that the city failed to kind of isolate or insulate the worker from the power lines. There was no protective covering over the lines or anything of that sort. There were some others as well, but those are kind of some of the main ones.
Yeah. So just picking apart one of those, the observer kind of has really struck me, that no one was watching the work as it was being done, or that's what OSHA has alleged. Were there some things like that basically, as far as we could tell, the city did not dispute? Like, was there an observer? Did they say, oh no, this was a specific observer?
Sorry, Jocelyn, internet was unstable for a second.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So I was asking whether or not there were any violations that the city actually did not dispute. Like the observer kind of strikes me as like either someone was watching or someone wasn't, but did they actually file appeals for every single violation?
They did. They're appealing everything, and including that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that really strikes me from reading the reporting is just the reality of how dangerous utilities work is. I mean, I think sometimes as residents we forget that. The thing that we're most concerned about is like, hey, the power's out. When is the power going to get restored? And you see a situation like this in which, when they're working on the poles and the transformers and the high voltage lines, there is just incredible power behind it. I mean, it's just so dangerous each time. And so all these different safety protocols need to be in place.
I agree. I think sorry, I'll get you. I have a thought on that. I just think one of the things that really attracted me to the story is, as you said, this is a very, very dangerous job. But unlike other dangerous jobs that the city has, like Palo Alto, like police and Palo Alto Fire, it's like we report on those a lot whenever there's like a major incident happening. Those come to mind immediately, like public safety. Utilities, I feel like, is kind of invisible almost. We expect the lights to be on all the time. We expect the water to be running, the garbage to be hauled. We don't really think that much about the people who are conducting these operations. And so this was a bit of a wake-up call. And the kind of jobs that the crew is performing are extremely common. And
they're common. Mm-hmm.
Very common. Yeah, that's what the utilities director told me and told the UAC after this accident, Utilities Advisory Commission. So this was a bit of a wake-up call to me, at least. Kind of, I wanted to make sure that the people who perform this kind of dangerous work kind of get recognized as well for the public service they're providing.
Yeah, day in and day out. Quite a risk. So the whole safety issue, I know that is really underpinning the whole investigation, because the question is out there: is it safe? Are the utilities workers risking themselves because of maybe lax safety procedures? What does the city have to say about that?
The city says that it's got an extremely good safety record. I mean, this was the first death in more than 3 decades. They mentioned to me in my interview that they had like a list of more than 1,600 days without time lost to injury at utilities, the electric operation. So, they're saying that safety is their #1 priority, and that they've taken various measures after the accident to make things even safer. But they were quick to note that this is not in any way to acknowledge what OSHA is saying. Is just part of their natural tendency to update their safety operations in the aftermath of a terrible tragedy. So that's kind of the city's response. From their point of view, while they won't talk publicly about what they think is the cause, and the way they defend themselves from like a family's claim, it seems like their take is that Mr. O'Hamana kind of didn't follow the instructions, and it was his deviation from the normal course of action that was the primary cause of the accident.
So the city is asserting that it was O'Hamana's mistakes that led to his death, and nothing having to do with the city's violation of procedure.
Yeah, they're very sensitive not to say that publicly, but in court responses, that is the indication. And we should acknowledge that the way an attorney representing the city would respond to a claim from the family about serious and willful misconduct would necessarily be very different from what the city would say in a public meeting or in a report. But that is the only indication we have from the city side. Since they won't talk to us about what they think happened, pretty much all we have to go by is the court documents and what they say in those.
Yeah. And what about the settlement with the family that was executed in December? Is that any kind of admission of a laxity of safety, or that the city did something wrong? Is that any kind of indication, or no?
I would say it's not. I think it's in the city's best interest always to avoid like very costly litigation. And in this case, considering the size of the utility, the settlement was $30,000 plus $5,000 to the attorney, which is not a lot of money for an operation that size. And furthermore, like they were very adamant in their response to the settlement that they're not admitting any kind of fault on behalf of the city, and they're strongly disputing OSHA citations even in the settlement document. So I would say it's in no way an admission.
Okay. And you just mentioned $30,000. There's also some sort of insurance amount, right, as well as.
Yeah, that would be the death benefit, the life insurance that would. The family would be entitled to regardless of who's at fault. Okay.
All right. So where do we stand now, and what's happening next? Is the city is appealing the citations? How far does this process need to continue to go in order to get some resolution on that?
It's a little hard to say because I've been following up with OSHA all the time, like for a while, and most recent communication last month, they were still trying to schedule a status conference. They've had a few of those with the cities, with the attorneys representing the city. And then eventually, if this goes like a lot of cases go, it's going to get to the Cal OSHA Board of Appeals. And then a judge will consider the merits of the investigator citations against the city's arguments. And then after the judgment, both parties will have the option of appealing that. And if that happens, that will go to the actual Board of Appeals, where the members will get to make the final decision. I expect it's going to take months, if not more. Usually, I was told these things take 12 to 15 months, but with the COVID and the backlog in cases and things like that, it might take a little longer. So, we'll be following it, but it's hard to say for anybody, including the parties, exactly how long it will take.
Okay, TBD.
Yeah.
All right, Janani, well, thank you for this overview of the reporting. And for our readers, if you haven't had a chance to dive into this story, you can find the weekly in the dark blue newsstand boxes that are on the street, or just go to paloaltoonline.com and it is all there. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.